welcome. My name is Penelope Chatterton. Welcome to Awaken the Dream. My friends, I have guests back that I haven't seen in over 3 years, Pedro and Kelly Silva. And they are going to have a very interesting chat today, and I'll let you think about what they could be talking about when they say back to the playground. And welcome to Awaken the Dream. Good to see you. You haven't changed.
No, not too much.
Except your daughter's older.
And my gray hairs and my
mustache. The gray hairs are all over your face. So now you're in a ministry.
Yes.
Correct. Tell me a little bit, if you don't mind explaining that, so I can help my friends with who you are.
Well, I pretty much think every person's in the ministry of some sort, you know. So mine's a little bit more formalized because I just went to school.
Yeah.
But essentially it's just...
That's acceptable.
Yeah. But essentially I just... really just trying to shine, you know. I think that when a person shines their light, that's a form of ministry.
It is.
And I'm just trying to do that, and just kind of went through some steps to kind of professionalize it to some degree, just to make it more accessible.
Well,
but
you want to be heard.
Yeah.
And it doesn't hurt.
Right.
Yeah. And you're following in his footsteps and joining with him.
I don't know about following, but
you're a good team. You feed off each other well.
Yeah,
as I recall in our last programs, you really join nicely together. But back to the playground. Let's give our audience a hint. When we think of playground, we think of...
Well,
playing,
kids swinging.
Kids, innocence.
Yeah, back to being innocent and just playful. And
in the Bible,
creative.
where are we going? Are we going somewhere in the Bible?
Oh, yeah, so this was originally inspired because we did a sermon together at our church, and we called it Back to the Garden, and it was basically like taking a look at the first relationship between Adam and Eve and how they had everything and everything was perfect, and then of course we know the story, they ate the apple, and then Adam blamed Eve and Eve blamed the serpent, and
the blame game.
Exactly. So we kind of took a different take on it and said that we each need to take responsibility for our own life, and then you can get back to the garden if you can take responsibility, accept forgiveness, you know, and just love each other in that space. So we were kind of playing with it as back to the playground.
Yeah, well, I'm envisioning a playground. Honestly, let's think of a group of kids running around. Maybe they're getting into a tussle or whatever, and, you know, as ministers and teachers, you know, helping them to see who that other person really is and honor that person. And, you know, as you say, take responsibility. I mean, I know a 2-year-old might struggle with that, but... you know, as far as learning about spirituality.
One of the interesting things that I observed with our daughter is she'll go on the playground and she'll meet some child she's never seen in her life, and she'll say, "This is my friend." You know, and she won't know the person's name. She doesn't know the background. There's no qualifications or anything that we might impose upon ourselves and others as adults. But she'll get out there and say, "Oh, see, this is my new friend, whoever." And then they'll run around. And they may even have some small little interactions, like somebody got on the slide and when the other person wanted to, and they'll have that mini argument, that mini tension, and then they get over it and they just keep going and they continue to play. And our idea is that we could all do that in our daily lives if we incorporate some of the things that children naturally do. Because I know one of Jesus' teachings was that we should be as children. You know, and from his perspective, he taught that you can't enter what he called the kingdom unless you were like a child. And so that perspective is a lot of what we try to incorporate in our lives, and also to learn and remember from watching our own child. Because there's that tension, you know, of trying to raise her to be able to make it in this world while simultaneously honoring what she brought to the world when she came here with her innocence.
And how to find some happiness and security. I don't know when you speak to children about the inner guidance and the inner voice and prayer and all of them. I'm sure you've talked about prayer. But it's interesting how that voice and guidance takes us through every day, and the art of listening is, it gets easier with time as you appreciate the fact that, my gosh, it's still ongoing, and it's still working with me, and don't overlook anything. It's my favorite. So we're going back to innocence, and we're trying to take the example maybe of children and moving it up to our stage. And think about, how do we get along with one another? How do we find inner peace? And we use our fellow men and women really in our projections to help us to see what we're looking at. So help us to see, what do we do when well, let's say I'm angry with Kelly and we're having it out, and what's my opportunity as I'm looking at her? What am I seeing? Who am I seeing?
Yourself. yourself. We're always like a mirror to each other, a reflection of each other. And of course, like the closer your relationship is, the more of that stuff that's going to come up, right?
And so that's almost awful.
Right.
But it is. It's it's that button pusher. People that you're intimately involved with and you deeply love and trust.
Right.
It wouldn't happen with a stranger, but we can bring things home and then all of a sudden, there it is. So, you know, that's interesting as a couple, too, that you could sit down and actually take responsibility and discuss it that way. Like, okay, I saw this on you, but, you know, I'm beginning to understand. So you could work it out. Because let's face it, as humans, we can raise our voices, we can whine.
Right.
Not you, of course.
I mean, I can whine, too. I can do my fair share of that. We all have, like, a child within us that hasn't learned the art of listening, which you spoke about a little while ago. So sometimes we hear what we're looking to hear. We're looking for something and trying to hear something that may hurt us because we have that hurt child inside of us. And I think when that happens, you know, we can whine. And I'm not immune to it at all.
Good. Because, you know, if the anger will take you somewhere if you process it and you really go to the depth of what's really the problem, then that's where the courage comes in for transformation and for healing, is to don't let it go with that and go off into your room and shut the door. That's an opportunity to go deep and shed yet another layer so that you can actually be free of that particular dynamic.
Yeah. I think one other thing that's awesome about children is they don't feel guilt, and even though we try to train them to take responsibility for their choices and the things that come up, we also don't want our daughter specifically to harbor guilt, because guilt, in my mind, is a way of avoiding responsibility, actually.
That's interesting. I like that.
Because then we can just say, well, I'm a bad person.
Right.
And
then,
well,
I'll just remain bad and I won't do anything about it because that's who I am.
Right. Exactly.
Nice take. Very nice. Very good contribution. Yeah, so no one's really bad. You could be having a hissy fit, but so what?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And we've absorbed, as humans, we've just on this plane, which is all just conditioned. We've taken all this in. I want us to appreciate on this program too how much there is that we've taken in.
Right.
All that fear about it. You name the area. There's no place other than your spiritual grounding to get away from that.
Yeah, that's true.
It can be scary out there.
You know, we talk sometimes when we make shifts or we do things that we know are contrary to the norm. We talk about the different imagery that comes up for us, and that's how we try to take responsibility. Like, we'll say, well, this is coming up. Like, Kelly's really good about saying, well, this is coming up. And when you look at it as it's coming up, it's not anybody's fault. It's just coming up. You know, and then we can try to look at it without blaming each other. I mean, sometimes we make a mistake and blame each other. But
we do make mistakes. But Kelly, when it's coming up, is your heart signaling you something? Like you're feeling something that's...
Well, I think just having anger or getting mad or feeling sorry for yourself shows you that you're off. Because I believe the whole point is just to find your alignment with Source or God or whatever you would call it. So in finding that alignment, if you're not in that space of feeling peace or joy, then you know you're off. And so if something's happening or, you know, I get angry with Pedro, then I'm like, okay, I know I'm off and this is what's coming up in me because I'm triggered. And I'll use that word a lot. I'm triggered right now. I'm not blaming you, but you might want to be careful because
you have pushed my buttons.
Yeah, and it might be running an old pain story or a program story that I had in my life, you know. But I mean, if you look at it as an opportunity, like you were saying, rather as like a bad thing or blaming someone, you can take responsibility for it and kind of move through it.
And it wasn't Pedro.
Ask for a healing, pray, or go meditate, go for a walk, whatever it might be that can fill that space and help you to get yourself back in alignment.
Yeah, we all have a past and we all have a pain body. And so if it's Pedro and you can talk to each other about it's not Pedro, but he's the perfect vessel to project onto because something's unfinished.
Right.
That just doesn't end. And that's not bad news. I think, I don't know, have you been through major volcanoes where there have been really big ones and then you find that as you grow and change, they become a little calmer and more gentle. And you realize that period that real trauma might be behind you.
Yeah. Yeah, we've experienced that, and a lot of times we'll go, "Hey, progress," and give each other like high five or something. If it's
it wasn't as bad this time.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And I think that's always been a benefit of our relationship, because we started with a spiritual foundation, even though we come from different spiritual backgrounds.
Oh, you do.
Right. Yeah. Because I was raised Christian.
And
well, I was raised Catholic, but I guess I would kind of consider myself just maybe almost new agey, you know.
Yeah.
I just believe in like.
but they're still
energy.
different. That's quite different. You've got the guilt thing.
Yeah. Oh, the Catholic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Funny, I
The
should
old
mention
program.
guilt.
Yeah. No, I mean, with myself, I always look at the Christian story. I see it as something that I choose to believe, not something I have to believe, which I think plays into some people's perspective on how they relate to the Christian narrative. I look at it as an opportunity to engage with a story of someone who took ultimate responsibility.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, whatever happens in our life, we have to take responsibility for it.
Yeah.
And so when I look at that tradition, I see, okay, here's a person who was trying to do good and then had this kind of not so awesome outcome.
Yeah.
And then when that person could have said, look what you did, you jerks, is like, oh, well, let's forgive.
Yeah.
You know. And so for me, I use that narrative as a way of seeing that within the consciousness of humanity, there exists the potential to forgive even the most extreme crime against oneself.
Yeah.
And there's this tendency for us to feel sorry for ourselves.
Yeah.
And personally, I think evil begins with feeling sorry for oneself.
Good.
And
That's
so
very good.
it's like, because of that idea of Christianity, which isn't necessarily the one that's propagated, I'm more open, because I see it as my choice, and then other people say, well, I choose this.
Yeah.
But it's still a spiritual path.
Yeah.
And so we had that to fall back on whenever we have any kind of conflict.
Well, Christianity has many different venues.
Yeah.
You know, some are punishing, some just see the Son of God in everyone and the potential of the Jesus in everyone.
Right.
There
Yeah.
are extremes.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think the true teachings and message of Jesus is just of love and forgiveness, you know, and I think that's
So
what everything
simple.
else is saying, you know.
Yeah.
And
Right.
so and that's what kids are doing, you know, when they're in that space in the playground and they're able to play in that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the next day they're friends again. You know,
Yeah.
they can have a problem one day, and the next day they're like, hey, you're my best friend again.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's freedom.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to hold on to the things or the mistakes that one makes, and just say, hey, I made a mistake, I learned from it,
Yeah.
moving on, let's be friends.
It's
Let's
so
just keep
safe.
going.
I'd imagine Callista's very safe in your home, but she will be out in the world of appearance with competition and one-upping, and there you'll really be on duty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, when she takes in all that is going on. And
Right. Yeah, there's actually this teaching, it's a biblical teaching also. It says, raise your child in the way that you want them to go, and when they're old, they won't depart from it. So it doesn't mean they're not going to depart from it,
Yeah.
but when they're in your house, you know, you raise them in the way that you would have them go. So we try to talk to her when things happen. We say, oh, forgive it, or things like that, and knowing that, you know, one day she's going to walk out and she's going to have an option, but at least if our voice is in her head later, the
I hear you.
ideal is that the voice that comes back to her is a voice of empowerment and a
Yeah.
voice of forgiveness and a voice of love and of learning, so
Yeah.
that she can have something to navigate
Yeah. Well, kids can be mean. The world
Right.
can be mean. People can pick on each other. And, you know, that's not necessarily right. And sometimes a kind voice, or taking responsibility for even saying, you know, I really understand that you're upset and it's not about, or some way of actually maybe addressing the problem without just being in total denial and and enabling maybe someone who's abusive to be abusive again. There's a fine line there on finding
Right.
those words and being a lawyer,
Right.
you know, finding that balance of
Right.
how can I say this where I'm not going to honor where you are, but I'm going to try and help you see what this is about. Negotiations.
Right.
Yeah.
And you got to do a lot of negotiation as a parent.
Yes, you do. Yes, you do. So, so you both come from fairly different backgrounds, but you see very metaphysically eye to eye, and Oh, and your website is therooflesschurch.com.
Yep.
I love the imagery. When I think of a roofless church, of course I see a roofless church and I see everything going up.
Right.
And that's super. Tell me what's on this website of yours.
It's essentially a blog, and there's some videos and just many, I would call them sermonettes, but not necessarily. Just like some ideas or some concepts that I encounter through daily life.
Yeah.
And I just kind of just talk about it, and it's because it's my own space, I can just say whatever I want to say.
You can say what you want. And you like to write?
Yeah, I like to write.
You get inspired?
I mostly need to write. I can't say I
Okay.
don't necessarily like to, but it's like the stuff comes up, and if I don't process it or
You got to get
put
it
out
out
in some kind of way, then, yeah.
That's very interesting that you should say that, because we talk a lot about sharing and how to do that. And it doesn't, I mean, some of us are artists, some of us are singers, some of us have to write because they have to get it out and the pen just takes off, or you get something that you can't stop. And it's interesting how we're all uniquely different on how we share.
Right.
The sky's the limit. And as you say, you don't have to be in a pulpit.
Right.
You can be in the supermarket helping someone who drops something.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many opportunities with whatever a person's vocation is or whatever it is that they do. If they're doing it with some kind of intentionality, at least from my perspective, if they're doing it with some kind of intentionality, they are doing some kind of ministry, and just by how they are. It's like Kelly's a photographer, and whenever she's taking pictures, somebody could just say, okay, well, she's just taking pictures, and it can just be a static enterprise. But because of the type of person she is, there's so much more going on behind the camera and going out into the world, and then being reflected back even through the pictures. You know, because she's projecting that who she is into that work and her form of creative. And she writes.
That's a nice topic too for our friends to hear about. All of us are in a ministry. We're all here to, we have to get it out. I can't say that enough. We have got to get it out to get it back. I mean, we have been had that way, in a sense. You know, it's there, and everyone's got it. Everyone is a pure son and daughter of God, and an extension of that energy, and you got to get it out. And it doesn't have to be in a pulpit. You can be anywhere. But so you can wake up and very privately be in your own ministry and very in touch with your guidance, making yourself feel happy and peaceful and full.
Yeah, and right now we're just kind of working on developing a ministry around our relationship to share that with the world, because I think, you know, relationships, like we said, it's where the most stuff is going to come up, because if your goal is to kind of be in alignment with Source all the time, then you're going to have to be shown where you're off. And out of that alignment, and so that's going to give you all your opportunities. And it doesn't have to always be romantic. It can be, you know, parent-child relationship, a friend, a good friend, but that stuff's going to come up, and then you get to face it, you know? So.
Well, that's a real vote for intimacy, isn't it?
Right.
A real vote for join with someone. If you're drawn to an assignment, go for it, because there's usually your name on it somewhere. Isn't that funny how that happens when you think about it? Gosh, somebody shows up in your face, and all of a sudden you have to recognize that you brought it to you.
Right. I mean, our relationship started out that way because I was by myself in Atlanta, not thinking about being in a relationship, and next thing you know, through a series of events, unplanned events, she showed up in my life through an email, and that was it.
You little devil.
And we got together, and I mean, I think some of the power of our relationship as ministry is that we're not just different, like from background culturally and things like that, and socially and all the other things, but we're obviously like different on the surface too. So people can see that.
That's true.
And so there's a ministry because we bring entirely different worlds together. And we essentially create world peace whenever we create peace between each other, because we're bringing worlds that are completely different together. And then hopefully our daughter will walk around just one like beacon of peace if it's possible.
I never thought about that you do represent the symbol of the whole world. So we're in the soil of our life, and we're on deck every day. Do you recommend our friends kind of get grounded before they take off for their day? I mean, do they check in and out? I mean, do you have recommendations for this realizing, being on deck, paying attention, I mean, so you don't just go flying out with wet hair late.
Right. That's what I was going to say. It's just paying attention to every little thing that comes up. Anytime you might feel triggered, even if it's just over traffic or the news on TV, and you have to just take responsibility for what inside of you is being triggered, and then just, you know, kind of forgive it and work with that space. Love it.
What do I do with it?
Yeah, what do I do with it? Because that's going to show you what you need to work on in your life.
You had to go mention news and stuff.
The news. That's the easiest thing to blame.
Yeah, well, it's tough news.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, that's almost like, how do I forgive that or understand it or feel, how do I pull myself together when I hear such trauma going on and such drama and such tragedy in our world?
It's hard, but you have to sometimes be like, what part of me isn't shining my light bright enough to get to those people, you know?
Love that.
And then it just makes you say, okay, well, let me just do that as much as I can. You know, it doesn't mean you try and go find those specific people and change them, but in your area, your arena, you shine your light as bright as you can, you know?
Well, may I say, too, it must help you feel better. And I'm really talking about disastrous things we hear and traumas. And
absolutely.
So how are we going to survive that except we get away from it, not by avoiding it, but serving? I mean, so that we're keeping ourselves, our heads above water, so to speak.
Yeah. I think ultimately it's also about perspective. One of the things I say to myself is, this is the day that the Lord has made. I'll rejoice and be glad in it. And then I remind myself that, like, that if I choose to believe that there is some kind of loving creator that's in play in our life, then everything I see is good in ways that I can't understand. I need to change my perspective.
I like your choice, because I make the same choice. The crooked ways are made straight today, and mansions are being prepared for me, and I am breathing within. I am breathing the breath of God. I am speaking the word. I'm hearing, and I'm on deck doing the work. And you know, I can't say enough for the little things that you might think are not the voice, but everything. If we really can realize that, really, even the grocery list or something you forgot, little things are guidance. So we have 5 minutes. So again, I know your website's been brought up, but it's therooflesschurch.com. And you talk with people. People can talk back to you. If you blog something, can they
can respond if they choose to.
If it's their lucky day?
They make the choice. I've been told, I mentioned to you before, somebody told me stop smoking crack.
Oh yeah, tell me what they said. What'd you say?
They said stop smoking crack because I said that we're all on an infinite journey. And then I said, well, that's always good advice.
Oh, what fun you could have with that one.
Right, so.
And you have video on.
Yep, videos. If they're appropriate, you know, for the content, then I'll post a video or take some picture or something. With the smartphones and things today, it's easy enough.
Yeah.
So
in a sense, you are, in our wonderful New Age kind of ministry, you are a church within yourselves, bringing whatever you are together. And it doesn't have to be called this church or it's that religion or anything like that, which is inspirational for our friends watching the program, that they too can join. And it's a church, even if it's two people working together and pouring out love and information and inspiration. That's the church.
And we're starting to do other things. We, like as we mentioned, we're starting to work on a book, and we have ideas of doing workshops and things. And Kelly started a blog also.
Oh, really?
Called Anatomy of God.
Anthropology.
Of God.
Anthropology.
God.
Of
Yeah.
God.
Anthropology. Of God. Yep.
Interesting.
Yep.
So,
Well, I can tell from not having seen you in a while, you're just both still on deck and growing and changing, and we want our friends to just remember that guidance. And it's sometimes, do you laugh sometimes when you hear the craziest guidance, that God really has a sense of humor, when you hear the funniest thing where you're thinking something else and then you get a head slap?
Yeah, that's a daily occurrence. That's life. You know, things just come up as they do, and you never know what's going to come up next. And I think that's the fun of life. And when you go to the playground, you don't know who's going to be there, and you don't know what kind of play is going to occur. You know, you just go out there, you play, and
with a white page.
Yep.
You go out, white page, you're not bringing yesterday to it, and then see what happens to you.
Right.
Yeah, what's happening to you? What's falling in front of your face?
Yep.
And so what do you do with it? So if you had all these plans about things you were supposed to do for the day and you were supposed to follow this, you don't want to do that. You want that clear space so that you allow
Right.
the guidance not to be interfered with.
If my plan ever works out, I just figure I must have tapped into God's plan. If it worked out, if
Yeah,
it
if
didn't, then I go, oh, okay, well, I was just off
you
and
got
I
in the
planned
way.
it.
Yeah,
so
that's
no big
an
deal.
interesting thing in our last couple of minutes. That, yeah, if it doesn't work out right or we didn't listen, do you ever notice sometimes you got a message and you did something else, and then you realized in hindsight, gee, if I had only, you know.
Yep, I did it with a lotto like so many times. I'm like, I'll pick my own numbers. Well, I'll lose. I'm just joking.
Well, it sounds like you have a little teacher with Callista, and what a fortunate little girl she is to have you two to raise her. And as I say, it's going to get to be more and more fun in our last minute, though. Thank you for coming out here and coming over the bridge.
Yeah, thanks for
Cape
having us.
Cod. Oh, it's wonderful to see you again, and we're going to talk to you again next week. So again, we'll be back to you.
Okay, thanks.
And thank you, my friends, for joining us on Awaken the Dream. We will talk to you again soon.